This modification is not affiliated with Team Salvato. It is designed to be played after the original game is completed. You can find a link to the game at that place. This modification covers sensitive topics such as self-harm, abuse, and religious beliefs. Okay. Well, sup? It's Hallie, and welcome to Yuri's Enlightenment.
Hello? Testing, testing. The camera is recording, right?
Yes, honey. As long as the red dot's on the screen, it should be working.
Oh, wonderful.
Must you feel the need to do this, Yuri? It's my responsibility as a... no.
It's my responsibility as a mother, Abdul.
You act as if you'll never get the opportunity to show her yourself.
It's a precautionary measure, nothing more.
I wish there was anything to distinguish this text from who's talking. And what's with the assumption that our...
And what's with the assumption that our child will be a girl?
A man can dream, can't he?
Men of our faith usually dream of having a son to carry the legacy.
Men of our faith also dream of having the chance to raise a young girl into a respectable woman. And with a mother like you, I can only imagine how perfect she'll be. My arms shudder as I try to hold the camera still. Do you want me to leave now?
If you may.
All right, I'll be cooking up a storm in the kitchen. Feel free to join me once you're done. I hear the sound of a door click. The silence returns with its tension replaced with an overwhelming sense of dread. Would this be Yuri's perspective now? Dots.
Well, I apologize for taking a bit of time. It's difficult to find the words to describe what exactly I plan on imparting to you, or onto you. My dear and most wonderful child. I think it's best to start at the beginning. I still find it quite difficult to talk about this part of my life. It wasn't too long ago, but when I look back, it seems like there are entire eternities between then and now. I should probably begin the story now, shouldn't I? Your father likes to point out to me how much I love to ramble, so I'll try to keep that to a minimum. All right. When I was in my high school years, I was at my lowest. I wasn't what you would call stable. Your mother wasn't a very outgoing person, you see. I had always wondered why anyone would put in the time to form relationships with others. Not particularly because I didn't see the value in them, but because I felt that sharing such a vast and personal part of your own being was rash. I was taught that true friendships consist of people baring their souls to each other and trusting them with everything you are, but I constantly found myself asking, how could you trust someone with your soul? I didn't really see the logic in it. And so I didn't participate in it. I was what my classmates would call a friendless freak. The names didn't really have the effect on me that they wanted. At the very least, I could commend them for being accurate. Because I truly was entirely friendless, and I was most definitely a freak.
The ticks of the grandfather clock begin to zone out, almost as if it had come to a complete stop.
I don't want you to get the wrong idea and think that I wasn't capable of being happy on my own. I was absolutely happy on my own. If I ever felt like I needed company, I found it in the close but faraway worlds described in the novels of my youth. They helped me stave off my ever-present feelings of loneliness, feelings that I wasn't ready to admit I had in the first place. Yet, they never could supplant a human's need to socialize, no matter how much I wanted them to.
Her hands grip together tightly, and I see her head shiver, maybe in frustration. My instincts tell me to go and comfort her, but I know I can't.
Sometimes, my dear, when you haven't been acknowledged by anyone else, and when you haven't really acknowledged anyone else either, sometimes it becomes difficult to discern whether you're truly alive. For a long stretch of time, my love, I was convinced that I was dead. My corpse wasn't rotting, however, or at least did not fit any definition of decomposition I was aware of. For all intents and purposes, I was growing. Maybe I was accumulating nearby detritus. I could never be sure. Maybe my senses were failing me. Dead women didn't feel, I thought to myself at the time. What is the feeling, really, and how could I be sure? I could touch, I could smell, I could hear. But those sensations, maybe they were just passing through me. Like a wisp whisked away in the breeze, able to take in the world around them, but never be a part of it. A small suggestion of existence, but never outright confirmed. For I could touch, I could smell, I could hear. But I could never feel. Until, once upon a time, the sharp sting of a stainless steel knife set its sights on my skin. And I felt it. I felt the knife split me open and spill the insides I never knew I had. Drops of crimson on the kitchen counter, painting a clear picture for me. Your father once described it like witnessing the scene of a murder. I described it as witnessing the beauty of a birth. Those scarlet drops showed me I was here and that I was real. The goal there digging its way into the new opening of my frantic body, cooling the smoldering heat of my rushing insides. It was like I had finally reached a sense of equilibrium. It was a high incomparable to anything I'd ever felt before. I finally felt alive. I felt alive. It became the only way I knew how to feel that way. And so, I made my first friend. A stainless steel knife that dug deep into me every chance I gave it. The scars I was left with were numerous. It's like my arms were home to rows of sleeping red ants. I'm sorry, I noticed that I'm starting to get a little too metaphorical.
A little?
I tend to do that when I feel nervous. Your father likes it, but he advised me to lessen the amount I would normally use for this recording. In case you watched this when you were younger and wouldn't really understand them.
I'm tempted to just close the camera and put a stop to all this, but it'd be rude to interrupt her, wouldn't it?
Anyhow, where was I? Yes, I was talking about how I furiously cut myself during my adolescence. That's a little bit of sarcastic humor I picked up from your... you already know who. By the time I was in my senior year, cutting myself had become an almost daily ritual. At any moment I felt myself dissociating from reality around me, I would pick up a knife and just cut into myself. Over time, even that primal rush petered out, and I had begun experimenting with different styles of knives, different cutting patterns. I had entirely forgotten that I was slowly damaging myself. From the inside out. It was at that time I had begun meeting new people. Or to be more accurate, new people had begun meeting me. There was this pair of girls. They were my juniors. They had invited me to join their literature club, and with such an attractive proposition, I couldn't say no. How could I? I could finally share my interests and show my passion. And simply, I was finally able to walk or talk to people about something that I felt was safe enough to talk about. Now about these girls. One was an overeagle coral-haired girl. You may know her as your Auntie Yuri. and the other one was this girl who I had seen all around campus, on trophies, on posters, and rapturing the conversations of the strangers who didn't even notice my presence as I walked past them. She was the school superstar. Monica. To say I felt a certain air of jealousy towards her would be an understatement. She was everything I wanted to be. She was intelligent, beautiful, and worst of all, she was brimming with life. There was never a moment where she was alone. And just by seeing her, I felt more lonely than I had ever felt in my life. It was funny, really. Whenever I saw her, I felt more alive than ever because I felt the dread of my own non-existence. It only got worse with the arrival of our new member, Natsuki. Hopefully your father stayed in touch with her as well. When she first arrived in the club, I'd say without hesitation that I was thrown into the depths of hell. She was the most uncontrollable, immature person I had ever met.
You mean met?
Every moment I spoke became a call to more, as everything I loved and believed in was challenged. That may sound a little dramatic, but you must understand that literature was my entire life. I didn't have friends, my family was distant. All I had were my books and my writing. So when someone challenged my views on them, it was like they had insulted a person who I cared for deeply. I had come to this club to become more comfortable with talking to people, to learn how to share myself with others. And instead, I cut. And I cut. And I cut. Every club meeting. Without fail. Sometimes Zero would catch on to the fact that I wasn't entirely okay and try to console me. Yet for some reason that I am still not aware of to this day, we had some unspoken understanding. She never investigated me any further than she had to, and only offered me her support when I explicitly asked her to. And Monica was too busy with the world around her to pay attention to her lowly club member, whose quiet and subdued nature could only mean she was in complete control of her life. For why would a person who needed help not announce to the world that they needed it? In all fairness, I didn't know if I needed help at the time. I thought it was okay to do what I did. It was my outlet, my way of bearing my soul to the world. It stayed that way for months afterwards. I thought I was improving because my sessions became more spread out. In retrospect, the change mostly happened because I was distracted. Distracted by the thought of disappointing people that I didn't know who I was. People that would never know who I was. When that feeling began to take over my every rushing thought, I was so overcome by it that I couldn't even think of anything else. The only way I knew how to stop it, how to feel anything else, was to cut. It was my answer to everything, after all. You have no idea the shame that's brought upon me whenever I reminisce upon my sinful years. I remember first revealing my unseemly habit to my companions at the club. I had thought that maybe an attempt at sharing this secret part of my life may lessen the burden and improve the situation. Sayuri and Monica were supportive, of course. They said every textbook line of support that would probably come to your mind. We'll help you through this. If you need anything, tell us. You are still the same beautiful, bright Yuri to us, no matter what. At the time, that response sparked so much anger in me. Their words couldn't even begin to comfort me, because they were obviously such rehearsed drivel. If I had read their words of aid in a book, I would have derided it for being cliché. Empty platitudes say nothing about you and the content of your character or the strength of your convictions. Even now I recall the look in Sayori's eyes when she said those things. That unspoken understanding we had didn't fade over time, so when I looked into her, I saw that even she didn't believe what she was saying. And Natsuki's reaction was, well, I applauded for being different at the very least. She, with utter disgust in her voice, said, "Stop being such an attention whore, Yuri." I didn't expect much from Natsuki, but even this seemed to be oddly unempathetic of her. I wanted to take that statement to heart and maybe use it as some form of constructive criticism, but the more I thought about it, the less it seemed to apply to me. It's true that from a certain perspective, I started this whole experience due to a lack of attention. In contrast, I continued it because I received too much of it. It was like I could never truly win. But there was another person in the club who remained silent during this revelation. They were content just listening in. They were a new addition, so they were most likely caught off guard by the sharing of something so personal in their presence. When I threw myself away and ran from the disaster of a meeting, I saw them chase after me. "Yuri," he screamed out. I felt my entire body quiver at his bellowing cry. I wasn't ready for another confrontation. When you're hit where you're most vulnerable, my dear, sometimes you'll find yourself shutting down against your own wishes. So I continued walking away. And then, it was the funniest thing. My phone started ringing. When I went to pick it up, I saw his name plastered on the screen. Against my better judgment, I picked it up and through my whimpering voice, I tried speaking to him. He said something to me that I would never forget. It must have been his status as an outsider that made him see things so clearly. He told me, "They're just scared, Yuri. They're your friends. Of course they are." And that was the day me and your father truly first met. From then on, the both of us got closer over the months. However, we never addressed what happened at the club that day. We just spent our time getting to know each other. It was pure and utter bliss. Him sitting so close to me, reading my favorite novel together. Him standing behind me, trying to scream out how to overcome the next challenge in one of his video games.